Jakie zachowania ucznia w klasie mogą być pierwszym sygnałem, że ma on trudności sensoryczne?
So I think it really depends on what the student's needs are. So sometimes you might see a student, if they've got sensitivity to different sensations, they might avoid situations, or they might overreact, or to you, they might be overreacting and have a bigger response, but actually their nervous system is just finding it hard to process the information. Or you might have children that are not responding because they're slower to understand the sensory information. So it really depends on the individual child and what their individual sensory needs are.
Jak nauczyciel bez przygotowania terapeutycznego może wspierać dziecko z trudnościami sensorycznymi?
So I think there's a few different things. Firstly, it's helpful if they understand the different senses and have a little bit of knowledge about sensory processing. And then next, if they link in with a child's therapist or someone that knows the child very well to understand what that child's sensory preferences are, what their needs are, and then that way they will know how to support them. And I think one of the biggest things is actually getting the environment right, so that the environment is supporting that child's needs rather than expecting that child to manage in a space that is actually not supporting their sensory needs.
Co powiedziałaby Pani nauczycielowi, który mówi, to dziecko jest po prostu niegrzeczne?
So for me, behavior is always communication. So when you're seeing behavior, the first thing to consider is, what does this child need? What are they trying to tell me? Because there'll always be something that is driving that behavior. So children and adults also have behaviors that we sort of display when things aren't maybe going the way we want them to go, or when we're finding it difficult. So it's just that piece of behavior is always communication. Sometimes it might be an underlying sensory need, but it can be something else as well. So it might be a communication need. It might be that the child's not feeling very well. So if you've got a child, particularly if they can't talk, their behavior will be telling you, maybe I'm not feeling well, or things like that. So I think if you've got a child who is misbehaving, it's helpful to really think, what are they trying to tell me?
Co jest najważniejsze w tworzeniu przyjaznej sensorycznie przestrzeni w przedszkolu lub szkole?
So I think, again, this is coming back to the individualization. So it depends on what the child needs. There's no magical, here's the sensory thing that will fix everyone. It's, if that child is more sensitive, it's decreasing the sensations in the environment to meet their sensory thresholds. If the child needs a bit more sensory information, it's making yourself a bit bigger, making the activity a bit bigger. I definitely think it's also helpful to have a space where those children that do overload quickly can go and just chill out. So a quieter space, and that might be a room to the side, depends on the school. And also a space that children can move if they need that extra movement.
Jakie mity na temat przetwarzania sensorycznego najczęściej Pani słyszy?
So I think one thing, we have done such a good job at promoting sensory. I think at the moment, sometimes sensory is seen as this magical fix-all that can solve every problem. But the reality is, if a child is having communication needs, or if the task is too hard for them, or they're not really interested in the task, a sensory support is not going to magically fix their cognition and thinking to be able to do that task that's too hard, or it's not going to suddenly make them really excited to be doing their homework if they don't like their homework. So I think we've done such a good job at promoting sensory. There's a much more awareness. We maybe need to do a bit more of a job now instead of saying, when is sensory the best tool and when is it maybe something else, because it's not going to fix everything.
Jak nauczyciel może wspierać rodzica, który nie rozumie jeszcze wyzwań sensorycznych swojego dziecka?
So this is going to be very individual and depending on where the parent is at. So I think it's really helpful to meet the parents where they are. So in my experience, most parents will be talking about things, behaviors, like we had the behavior question. So parents might have behaviors that they're worried about, or they might have activities that their child's not able to do. So there's usually something that the parent might not understand as sensory, but there's something that they'll be talking about. So you can meet them at that place and then introduce the idea that it could potentially be sensory. And it's also helpful, I think, to share strategies and supports that you find are working at school with the parents so they can use them at home. And that can also open up the conversation. So I noticed that Sarah was finding the noise very loud, so we gave her some ear defenders. Do you see this at the shops, or do you see this at birthday parties? So you can share that knowledge with them as well.
Okay, thank you so much.